Evan Carter had always believed that life's biggest turning points arrived quietly, but he never expected one to come on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He stood inside the bathroom of his small apartment in Portland, Oregon, the mirror fogging from the shower he had finished minutes earlier. He wasn't looking at his reflection, he was looking through it, into the heavy thoughts that had been weighing him down for weeks. His chest felt tight, not from stress alone, but from the silent argument he'd had with Lila the night before. She had walked out with soft anger in her eyes, the kind that didn't shout but still hurt deeply. Evan didn't blame her. He blamed himself for the growing distance he couldn't seem to bridge. He brushed his hand through his damp hair, wishing he could brush away the sadness too. Just then, a firm, unexpected knock broke the thick silence. He froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. The knock came again, gentle but full of concern. Was a voice he could recognize anywhere. "Evan, sweetheart, are you all right?" His mother, Margaret, called through the door. She wasn't supposed to be here. She lived 3 hours away in Seattle and never dropped by unannounced. He swallowed hard and hesitated, unsure if he wanted her to see him like this. He tried to force out a response, but his voice failed him. Before he could attempt again, the doorknob gently turned and the door opened with a soft creak. His mom stepped inside, her eyes widening. Not because the room was messy, or because he was sitting on the closed toilet lid with a towel around his shoulders, but because she instantly sensed something was wrong. Mothers could read heartbreak the way others read headlines. She didn't ask permission. She walked toward him slowly, like someone approaching someone wounded. "Honey," she whispered, "what happened?" Evan tried to hold his expression steady, but something about her presence, her calm, her warmth, her quiet understanding made the truth rise to the surface. "I think I messed everything up," he finally said. His voice cracked, and he hated that it did, but Margaret didn't judge him. She placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and gentle. "Is this about Lila?" she asked. He nodded once, quickly, like he didn't trust his voice anymore. She didn't push him. Instead, she looked around the room for a moment, taking in the scattered signs of stress, the half-shaved beard, the clothes tossed carelessly in the corner, the barely touched cup of cold coffee sitting on the sink. It was the room of someone who'd been living with too many thoughts and not enough rest. "I woke up thinking I'd drive down and surprise you," she said softly. "I didn't know you needed me this much." Those words broke something open inside him. He hadn't realized how exhausted he was, emotionally, mentally, even physically. "We fought last night," he said, forcing the words out quickly before he lost courage. "Nothing loud, just painful." She said she doesn't know if we're on the same page anymore. He pushed a hand against his forehead, like the memory was too bright to look at directly. "And she left before I could explain anything." Margaret listened the way she had when he was a child, telling her about a bad day at school, patient, present, and without judgment. "You love her," she said, not as a question, but as a truth spoken aloud. Evan nodded, "More than she realizes. But lately, everything I say feels wrong. I feel like I'm losing her, Mom." His voice shook with frustration more than sadness. "I don't want to lose her." Margaret exhaled slowly, her eyes softening. "Sometimes," she said gently, "love doesn't fade. It hides behind fear or silence. Maybe she's scared too." The way she spoke made the bathroom feel less small, less suffocating. Evan felt his breathing steady slightly. "You have a good heart," she continued. "Maybe you just need to talk to her without fear of losing her. Speak honestly, not defensively." Evan hadn't realized how badly he needed to hear something hopeful, something grounding. His shoulders relaxed a little as her words sank in. For the first time that morning, he felt like the situation wasn't hopeless. Margaret gave his arm a squeeze, not trying to fix everything, just reminding him he wasn't alone. And while they stood in that cramped bathroom, the air carrying the faint smell of soap and steam, Evan felt a shift, small but important. A moment where something broken stopped falling apart and began to steady. He didn't know it yet, but the knock on the bathroom door was the beginning of a day that would change everything. Margaret stayed beside Evan in the small bathroom, but the heavy silence between them began to loosen as she tried to understand what her son had been carrying. Alone. She moved a towel aside and sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching him with the kind of patient worry only a mother could hold. Evan stood near the sink, gripping the counter like he needed something solid to hold on to. "I don't know when. Things changed," he said quickly, as if afraid to slow down. "One day everything felt easy with Lila, and then suddenly every small thing became a misunderstanding." He rubbed the back of his neck, his shoulders tense. "We weren't fighting loudly. It was more like we weren't connecting anymore." Margaret nodded slowly. "That kind of distance can feel worse than fighting," she said gently. "It's quiet, but it hurts just as much." Evan looked at her through the mirror, his expression tired. "I tried talking to her, but my words kept coming out wrong. She said she feels like I don't listen." "I do listen, at least I try to, but lately it seems like we're speaking different languages." Margaret leaned forward, her brows tightening. "With understanding, you're overwhelmed. She's overwhelmed. When two people feel misunderstood at the same time, they start building walls without even knowing it." Her voice was soft but steady, grounding him. Evan stepped away from the sink and sat beside her, elbows on his knees. His voice dropped. "Mom, what if she decides she's done?" The fear in his words made Margaret's heart soften even more. She placed her hand on his back. "Walking away is easy when someone doesn't matter. But Lila matters to you. And from everything I've seen, you matter to her too." Evan wanted to believe that, but doubt had been living inside him for weeks. "Last night she said she didn't know if I still cared the same way," he said. "How can she think that?" Margaret took a moment before answering. "Sometimes people don't see the love you feel. They only see the love you show. And when stress gets in the way, showing love becomes harder." Evan let out a breath that sounded almost like frustration at himself. "I should have done more. Or maybe I pushed her away by trying too hard at the wrong moments. I don't know." Margaret shook her head gently. "Isn't about perfect timing. It's about honest timing." She touched his arm, making him look up. "You're hurting." "She's hurting. But none of this sounds like to people who stopped caring. It sounds like to people afraid of losing each other." Her words hit him deeper than he expected. The bathroom felt warmer, almost comforting. He hadn't realized how much he needed someone to name the truth he couldn't see clearly. "You know," Margaret continued, "when your father and I were dating, we went through something similar. We kept assuming what the other person felt instead of asking. It almost ended us." Evan blinked, surprised. "You too? Really?" She nodded with a small smile. "We learned the hard way that silence is often louder than anger. It fills the space between two people until they forget how close they used to be." Evan stared at the patterned floor tiles, thinking of all the nights he and Lila sat together but felt worlds apart. "So what do?" he asked. "What if talking makes things worse?" Margaret shook her head. "Talking from fear makes things worse. Talking from honesty makes things better." She paused. "Tell her what you told me. Not in a dramatic way. Not expecting perfection. Just speak like you're speaking. Now real, open, human." Evan sat quietly, letting her words settle. Something in him felt lighter, like the weight he carried wasn't crushing him anymore. "You've always been strong," Margaret said. "But strength isn't pretending everything is fine. Strength is admitting when your heart feels fragile." The honesty of that sentence made him close his eyes for a moment. He inhaled deeply, trying to gather himself. Margaret stood up and smoothed her coat sleeve. "You don't have to fix everything today," she said. "But you can start today, and that's enough." Evan nodded slowly, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time since the argument. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he wasn't alone. His mother's presence had steadied him, pulled him back from the heavy, spiraling thoughts that had been sitting on his chest all morning. And as she opened the bathroom door, he felt the first quiet shift toward clarity, toward courage, toward the possibility that maybe things with Lila weren't lost after all. Evan stepped out of the bathroom, feeling lighter than he had all morning, though the tension in his chest hadn't completely disappeared. The words his mother had shared still echoed in his mind, giving him courage he hadn't felt in weeks. As he moved toward the living room, his phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating insistently. He froze when he saw the name on the screen. Leela. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to hear from her. Not today. Not after the heavy silence that had stretched between them for days. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the message that simply said, "Can we talk? I'm outside." The short, simple words carried a weight he couldn't ignore. For a second, Evan felt panic. What if she had come to tell him she was done for good? What if he had already waited too long to fix things? But then a quiet confidence his mother had given him reminded him to breathe and step outside. The air was crisp, the evening sun fading into a soft purple sky. And he could see her standing near her car, arms crossed over her chest as if to shield herself from the chill, but he knew it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. He took a deep breath and walked toward her, each step faster than the last, heart racing with hope and fear tangled together. When she noticed him, her lips curved into a small, nervous smile, one that carried relief and worry at the same time. "I didn't know if you'd come out," she said softly, her voice trembling a little. "I didn't know if you still wanted me to," Evan replied honestly, his eyes locked on hers. The words hung between them, fragile but full of meaning. Lila took a small step forward, then stopped, unsure how to bridge the gap that had formed over weeks of unspoken tension. "I've been scared," she admitted, "scared that if I opened up, I'd push you away. But today I realized I don't want distance. I want us." The pause before the last word was thick with emotion, and Evan felt the familiar ache in his chest soften. He had feared losing her, but now he could see that fear had been shared, mirrored in her own hesitation. "I want us to," he whispered, stepping closer, careful not to overwhelm her, just letting his presence speak. The air around them seemed to hum with quiet intensity, the kind of tension that isn't about anger or pain, but about longing, about the unspoken love that had been waiting for someone to reach for it. Neither of them moved to embrace immediately. They didn't need to. Their words, their glances, and the gentle evening breeze seemed enough to communicate everything that had been left unsaid. Lila's eyes glistened, and Evan's heart swelled with the knowledge that they were both still willing to try, still willing to face the vulnerability that came with being open to each other. Just then, a light flickered from the window of his apartment, and he realized his mother was watching quietly, her expression calm, hopeful, and proud. She had given them the space to confront their emotions. And Evan felt a warm gratitude toward her that made him even more certain that this moment was real, that this conversation could be the turning point. "I've missed you," he said, softly, unable to hide the truth. "I've missed us," Lila admitted, a small tear glinting in her eye as the last light of sunset reflected off it. The fear of misunderstanding and distance that had haunted them now began to dissolve, replaced by the delicate hope of connection. They talked then, not long speeches, not arguments, but small, honest sentences that allowed each to hear the other's heart. Every word felt like a bridge across the days of silence. Evan realized that the courage his mother had given him wasn't just about speaking. It was about listening, about being present in the moment without expectation, and about trusting that love could survive fear if nurtured gently. Lila's hand brushed his, almost by accident, and the contact sent a spark of reassurance through both of them. They didn't rush, but they didn't need to. The simple act of showing up, of stepping outside to face the conversation, had shifted everything. As the evening darkened and the first stars appeared overhead, Evan knew that this was the moment when healing could truly begin. The fear that had weighed on his chest all week was still there, but it was now mixed with anticipation. A quiet optimism that their love might not only survive but grow stronger. And though the night was just beginning and the conversation was far from over, the simple fact that they were standing together, facing their fears honestly, gave Evan hope that the chapters ahead could be written with love, patience, and understanding, just as his mother had quietly taught him. Evan and Leela moved to the backyard porch, leaving the dim glow of the street behind and the quiet of the evening wrapped around them like a protective blanket. The night air was cool, but it felt comforting. Rather than harsh, carrying the faint smell of blooming flowers from a neighbor's garden, they sat on the wooden bench, the boards creaking slightly under their weight, and for a moment neither spoke. The pause wasn't awkward. It was a space where the weight of their fears and misunderstandings could finally settle. Evan took a deep breath and looked at her. Really looked, noticing the subtle tension in her shoulders and the way her eyes searched his face for reassurance. "I don't want perfection," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I just want us messy, scared, learning together." Lila's eyes softened and a small, almost relieved smile appeared on her lips. She reached out, letting her fingers brush his hand, a gesture that felt both cautious and hopeful. "I thought I needed distance to protect my heart," she admitted, "but I realized the only place my heart feels safe is with you." Her words were simple, but the honesty behind them carried a weight that neither of them could ignore. They leaned back slightly, letting their hands remain intertwined, and began talking. Not about past mistakes, but about what they wanted moving forward. Each word was deliberate, free from blame, full of honesty. Evan shared how lonely he had, felt how he had been afraid to say the wrong thing, and Leela listened, her eyes reflecting both compassion and understanding. She admitted her own fears, how she had worried that her insecurities might push him away. And for the first time in weeks, the barriers between them started to crumble. Neither tried to fix the other. They only offered presence and empathy. A quiet acknowledgement that love was not about control, but about choice. As the conversation continued, the night sky grew darker, and stars began to peek through, tiny points of light above them. The serenity of the evening mirrored the shift, in their hearts moving from uncertainty to clarity. Evan realized that love wasn't just about grand gestures or dramatic words. It was about showing up, being honest, and trusting that the other person would meet you there. Lila squeezed his hand, and he returned the gesture, a silent agreement that they were choosing each other no matter the fears that lingered. Inside the house, through the window, Margaret watched with a quiet smile. She knew she had done her part simply by giving them space to find their own way back to each other. And she felt a deep satisfaction that they were facing their emotions with courage and care. Evan and Lila didn't need to rush into declarations of forever. The night itself felt like a promise, a gentle reminder that love could be renewed when both hearts were willing to try. They spoke about small, practical things, 2 plans for the weekend, shared meals, moments where they could support each other, and every word built a bridge back to the closeness they had almost lost. The air between them became warm, intimate, in the way that only true emotional honesty can create. And every touch, every glance, reinforced the connection that had been hiding beneath weeks of fear and silence. When Lila rested her head lightly on Evan's shoulder, he felt the tension in his body ease completely for the first time in days. There was no need for dramatic gestures, no need for rushing. The simple act of being together, being present, and being vulnerable was enough. They laughed softly at small memories, shared dreams, and even their fears, feeling a bond that was now stronger because they had faced the hard parts openly. By the time they finally stood to head inside, the night had deepened and the stars shone brightly, almost as if celebrating their courage. Evan knew that the journey ahead would still have challenges. But this moment, the honest conversation, the gentle touches, the acknowledgement of each other's hearts had laid a foundation stronger than anything fear or doubt could shake. As they walked hand in hand back toward the house, Evan glanced at the window to see Margaret's approving smile, a quiet affirmation that love, when nurtured with patience and honesty, could survive anything. The fear and tension of the past days were no longer heavy on his chest. Instead, they were replaced with hope, warmth, and a deep sense of connection. And in that gentle, starlit evening, Evan and Leela knew that they had chosen each other again, not perfectly, but fully, honestly, and with hearts open to whatever the future might bring.